Welcome back, everyone, to another Deep Dive Explainer. So today we're unpacking a true classroom classic, Liam O'Flaherty's short story, His First Flight. If you're studying this text right now, maybe gearing up for a big essay or assignment, well, you are exactly where you need to be. We're going to look way past the feathers and the cliffs here and actually uncover the rich psychological framework hiding right beneath the surface of this incredible little tale.
Now, I know what you might be wondering. What can a scared little seagull actually teach us about human psychology? It sounds kind of funny, right? But honestly, think about a time when you were just absolutely petrified to try something new. Maybe it was, speaking in front of the whole class or moving to a totally new city. That overwhelming, paralyzing dread, that is exactly what our main character is feeling. By looking closely at how this simple bird overcomes his fear, we can learn a tremendous amount about our own personal fears, our basic human needs, and, really, the very nature of courage.
Okay, let's dive into this structured journey to help you absolutely ace those assignments. We'll start with the author and story, then move to the seagull's dilemma, unpack the central metaphor, dive into Maslow's hierarchy explained, and wrap it all up with courage and independence.
All right, Section 1, the author and story. So our author here is Liam O'Flaherty. He was a major figure in the Irish literary Renaissance. Born back in 1896 on the Aran Islands, he quite literally grew up completely surrounded by the vast, wild ocean. And because of that, he was this remarkably keen observer of sea life. But more importantly for us, he was an incredible observer of human nature. O'Flaherty had this unique talent for blending natural, wild settings with deeply human struggles. He gives a beautifully humane touch to the plight of animals, using them to reflect our own nervousness and challenges.
Let's do a quick refresher on the plot so we're all on the same page. We've got this young seagull who's just completely terrified to fly, totally convinced his wings are going to fail him. So, in an act of what you might call extreme tough love, his family leaves him completely alone on a rocky ledge for 24 hours. He's got nothing to eat. Extreme hunger really sets in. Finally, his mother approaches. She tempts him with a delicious piece of fish, but she stops just out of reach. Absolutely maddened by hunger, he dives for it, begins to fall, and then, almost instinctively, spreads his wings and takes his very first flight.
Moving right along to Section 2, the seagull's dilemma. Let's zoom in and see exactly how this dilemma builds. The day before, he actually watched his parents and his siblings out there, perfecting the art of flight, skimming the waves, diving for fish. He even watched his older brother catch his first herring, but our young seagull, he just couldn't muster the courage to join them. So for a full 24 hours, he's totally isolated. He tries literally everything to get their attention without having to actually fly. He even stands on one leg and pretends to sleep. But it's only when his mother halts just out of reach with that fish that necessity really forces his hand. The sheer hunger completely overrides his terror.
And, we really have to validate his terror here. Just look at this quote straight from the text. The great expanse of the sea stretched down beneath, and it was such a long way down, miles down. Well, Flaherty writes it this way to make sure we, the readers, actually feel that vertigo. The bird's hesitation is totally understandable. He's not just being stubborn for the sake of it. In his mind, he is facing certain death.
Which brings us to Section 3, the central metaphor.
Now listen, if you take away absolutely nothing else for your essay, you need to remember this definition. The central metaphor of the story is that the seagull's physical flight represents the human psychological journey of overcoming fear to achieve true independence. O'Flaherty isn't just giving us a nature documentary about a bird here. He's writing a really powerful parable about human growth. That physical ledge he's stuck on, it's really a psychological barrier.
So, the crucial point is that we are all at various points in our own lives standing on a ledge, terrified of the drop. They say every journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. But let's be real, that single step is always the hardest part. This story acts like a mirror. It reflects our own reluctance to leave our comfort zones, reminding us that we absolutely have to venture out to realize we were, in fact, born with wings.
Next up, Section 4, Maslow's hierarchy explained.
Okay, let's bring in some psychology. Abraham Maslow was an American psychologist who, back in 1943, proposed this really famous pyramid to explain what motivates us as humans. His theory basically argues that we have to satisfy our basic, lower-level needs before we can even begin to care about higher-level desires. It starts right at the bottom with basic physiological survival, then moves up through safety, love and belonging, esteem, and finally peaks at the top with self-actualization, which is basically reaching your absolute full potential.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly why the young seagull behaves the way he does. We can literally map his entire journey step by step on this pyramid. First, he's driven by physiological needs. The guy is starving. Second, safety. He refuses to fly because he wants to protect himself from falling. Third, belonging. He is desperately missing his family out there. Fourth, esteem. He eventually earns their respect and praise. And finally, step 5, self-actualization. He masters flight and experiences true, pure freedom.
If you need to cite some solid textual evidence for your assignments, definitely use these points. For physiological needs, talk about how O'Flaherty describes him desperately gnawing on the dried pieces of his own eggshell. Just brutal. For safety, point out how he retreats to the little hole under the ledge to sleep. For love and belonging, describe him just plaintively watching his family skim the waves without him. And for esteem, quote that amazing moment when he finally flies, and his family swoops right around him, uttering joyful screams and handing him scraps of dogfish. It is just a perfect psychological progression.
And that takes us to our final part, Section 5, Courage and Independence.
Notice the incredibly stark contrast here. At the very beginning of the story, we have the dependent seagull. He's fearful, he's starving, he's totally stuck, and he literally expects others to chew his food for him. But by the end, we have the independent seagull, courageous, self-reliant, riding the wind and completely free. Courage is the bridge between these two states of being. The story makes a bold claim that everyone needs to achieve independence, but the true joy of that independence is definitely not meant for cowards.
From a teacher or parent's point of view, the mother seagull is honestly putting on a masterclass in motivation here. Her actions perfectly embody that famous Chinese proverb, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. By flat out refusing to just hand her son the food, she forces him to learn how to fish for himself. She uses some pretty harsh but totally necessary tough love to spark his independence. She knows that if she just feeds him today, he'll literally starve tomorrow.
Now, what's really interesting here is how it captures the seagull's actual, literal experience of falling. When he first dives off that ledge, this monstrous terror completely seizes him. But it only lasts a single moment. The very next second, the wind catches his breast feathers and boom, he is soaring. Franklin D. Roosevelt's famous maxim, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself," rings so entirely true here. The seagull's buildup, the anticipation, the sheer terror of falling were actually infinitely worse than the act of flying itself.
So, as you wrap up your study notes, try to distill the story's themes down to these core bullet points. First, true independence requires both self-belief and physical action. Second, sometimes we need a spark from the outside. Necessity, like extreme hunger, often provides that exact push. Third, facing our fears directly is really the only true pathway to psychological growth and self-actualization. And finally, we simply must step out of our comfortable little ledges if we ever want to find our wings.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder today. Look back at your own life for a second. Have you ever been utterly terrified to take a giant leap into the unknown, only to realize, once you finally jumped, that you were born with the exact wings you needed to fly, all along? Keep that in mind the next time you find yourself standing on a ledge. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, good luck with your studies.